Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
And welcome into the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitta. Thanks for being with us today on this edition of our program. We get together each week to talk about issues that are facing Cape Cod, the islands, and all of southeastern Massachusetts. Welcome into the show today. We're talking about an important event that's coming up on September 11th through the 13th here on Cape Cod. It is the Challenge Walk MS, a 3-day, 50-mile walk right here on Cape Cod, all to benefit the National MS Society. Hundreds of walkers will fight fatigue for sure with a 50-mile walk and blisters to complete the walk. The goal is to raise about $1 million to fund cutting-edge research to stop the disease progression. And in studio with us to talk about this event, we'd like to welcome in two guests this morning. First of all, Patty Thorpe is a woman here in Massachusetts living with MS. She's also a chapter board of trustees member and also one of the walkers for this year's event. And Patty, thanks so much for coming in studio today to tell your story. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for having us here.
Sure thing. And also joining me in studio today is a gentleman who I've spoken with many, many times over a whole lot of years. Steve, we won't say how many so that people won't realize how old we are, but appreciate you coming in, Steve. Steve Sookikian, did I get that right, Steve? For the most part, Steve Sookikian is the Associate Vice President of Communications with the National MS Society Greater New England Chapter. Hey, Steve, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Matt, too. Thank you.
Thanks for being here today. We appreciate it very much. As I said, we're going to talk today about Challenge MS. It is a 3-day, 50-mile walk here on Cape Cod, all to raise money and awareness for the issue of multiple sclerosis. So we'll start out with Steve, I think, if you would, kind of give us the big picture here on what the event is. Let's start out there. What do people need to know about what you're going to be doing on September 11th through the 13th?
Well, this is the 14th Challenge Walk MS on Cape Cod. It's a great experience. We started in 2002, and we have probably close to 500 walkers and several hundred crew members who will be on the Cape starting Friday the 11th. We start at the Hyannis Village Green, and about 8 o'clock we get things started with an opening ceremony, and the walkers will proceed 20 miles from the Village Green to Brewster. The first 10 are mostly on back roads, a little bit on 28 first thing in the morning, but then we get to the back roads along the water to the extent we can, and then work our way into the Cape Cod Rail Trail. So the second half of the day would follow about 10 miles on the rail trail to Brewster, and we overnight at the Cape Cod Sea Camps there, both Friday and Saturday. And then Saturday we do a 20-mile loop out of the sea camps north through Eastham and those areas. And
yep.
I don't think we get all the way to Truro.
But up into the Wellfleet, Eastham, Wellfleet area?
Yeah, definitely. And then we finish back again at the sea camps. And Sunday, we go west 10 miles to Dennis, mostly along 6A, and we finish at the Nathaniel Wixon School. But that's for the walkers and the crew members only. They regroup, everybody collects there, and then we bus them over to the Hyannis Transportation Center, and about 2 o'clock they parade down Main Street back to the Village Green where they started, and we have our closing ceremonies. And that parade on Sunday is really a very emotional experience. One thing that we do is we give them fresh T-shirts, and those people who have MS will wear an orange T-shirt, and everybody else will wear blue in support. So when you see that parade coming down, that column of people parading down Main Street, and you see the orange T-shirts out front, you know that those are the people with MS who've done the walk or who volunteered for the weekend to support it. And it's really a very emotional experience for everybody involved.
It's good that you get new T-shirts after all that.
Yes, after 3 days.
You know, there are a lot of walks around the Cape many times throughout the years that help out different causes. Sometimes it's, a nice little 5K or a 2-mile walk, but you guys are going full bore here with a 50-mile walk. Talk about that. Talk about kind of what you're trying to create, if you will, by doing a 50-mile walk.
Well, it's really about raising the bar. MS is a disease that doesn't stop, and we want to make sure that we end MS now. as soon as we can. So raising the bar is really the best thing that we can do. We have many events, as you said. We have walks. In fact, in September, there's a walk in Falmouth coming up. But that has a lower bar, a lower threshold for people, kind of an entry-level event, if you will. This one is for people who are really motivated, who really want to take action, folks like Patty, who recruit others to join her with her team and surpass that $1,500 fundraising minimum. So the event's really, the distance of 50 miles reflects the fundraising emphasis and significance of the event as well.
Now, this all gets underway on September 11th. It runs over 3 days. You're expecting 450 or so walkers or so, 200 volunteers, I understand, approximately?
Yes, could be upwards of 300 volunteers, depending on how many one-day volunteers we have. But we also have crew members, about 200 some odd crew members, who actually pay a $75 registration fee for the privilege of volunteering for the 3 days because we house and feed them. But they're just absolutely incredible. And Patty will attest, I'm sure. They put on costumes. They have themes. They really inspire the walkers to keep moving. I mean, you can hear those folks cheering 2 miles away, and it helps you make the distance.
Nice. Let me bring Patty into the conversation. Patty Thorpe is a woman living with MS here in Massachusetts. As I said, also a chapter board of trustees member and also one of the walkers. Hey, Patty, thanks for being here again. Appreciate it.
Again, thanks for having me here.
Tell me your story, Patty.
Well, I was first diagnosed with MS about 20 years ago, and at the time we weren't sure if it was MS or not. I was at a gym just working out on a treadmill, and all of a sudden it was like somebody reached into a jar of Vaseline and smeared it across both of my eyes. Couldn't see a thing. So I went to a doctor to find out what was going on, and I was diagnosed with something called optic neuritis, which is an inflammation of the optic nerves. And there are a lot of things that can cause optic neuritis, but in my case, my doctor thought it could have been the strenuous exercise I was doing. Sometimes that can cause it. So it became, one of our favorite jokes that's when we knew that the nuns had it wrong. It's exercise that makes you blind.
So take us through then the eventual diagnosis. Do you get different tests, et cetera?
Yes.
How does that?
Because I was exercising at that time, and we thought that caused optic neuritis. It's sort of, I didn't think about it again for several months. But the second time I had that sudden blindness, I was just sitting at a desk. I was working. I wasn't doing anything strenuous at all. And that's when I went through a full battery of tests and ultimately had the MS diagnosis.
Now, I know people are familiar, they hear MS, they know multiple sclerosis in general, but can you give us a little bit of kind of a non-medical or, to the degree that our listeners will understand, an overview of what MS is? Sure.
Around your brain, spinal cord, and optic nerves is this substance called myelin. And think of it as like a protective covering. It's just sort of a coating around those nerves. And in people with MS, our immune systems see that covering as an enemy and attacks it and destroys it and leaves these area called plaques. And so a nerve impulse will be, zipping along, hit one of those plaques and stop. Now, eventually the impulse can find a way around that plaque and functionality can be restored. But sometimes there are so many plaques, or the plaques are so big, there is no way around it, and that's when permanent disability occurs.
Is there a way, or is there research into removing those plaques altogether? What's the state of the research?
Yes, I'll let Steve talk more about the research, but yes, that's one of the things that's being funded.
I want to get into that in a minute.
Is repairing myelin.
Repairing, okay. Yeah. We'll get into that in a minute. Patty, I want to stay with you for a little bit here. So this is 20 years now that you're living with MS. Tell me what your life is like right now.
For the most part, it's wonderful. MS is a very unpredictable disease. You never know when an attack is going to happen or relapse. I have relapsing remitting MS. There's also progressive MS, which isn't, there's no relapses. It's just continually gets worse. Mine is relapsing remitting. So I'll have a relapse, a period of disability, a period of blindness, but then I can come out of it and be better. It always leaves a little bit of disability behind, when the relapse is over. But for the most part, my day-to-day living is normal. Most people looking at me would have no idea that I have a chronic disabling disease. But it's the unpredictability that's so hard, because you never know when an attack is going to happen. and it's instantaneous.
Agreed. I mean, obviously we're here on radio, but you do not exhibit any type of outward, indications that you do have this. What are the things you have to be careful of? This can come on very suddenly, Patty?
Very suddenly. My last relapse was just about a year ago, and it was a severe one. I was bragging to my daughter that I had a great night's sleep. It was a Sunday morning, and I had the best night's sleep I had in a year. And as soon as I said that, I had a cup of tea in my hand, and I felt like somebody drove an ice pick into my eye. The pain was severe, and the blindness came on. I dropped the cup. And I ended up being in the hospital with that relapse about 10 days for treatment. But it's that fast that, it's just a split second, and I had an attack.
But there are ways that you're managing it so that you can live a very fulfilled life right now.
Yes. I take an injection daily of a medication that reduces the number of relapses. Yes.
All right. Patty, we'll come back to you in a moment. Let me go back over to Steve. Steve is our other guest today. Steve Sookikian is the Associate VP of Communications with the National MS Society. Well, Steve, I'll tell you, it's really just, I think, almost an inspiring story from Patty. She's somebody who's living a great life, even though she's going through this with MS. Bring us up to speed. Where are we with research? What's going on with MS, Steve? What do we know?
Well, as Patty suggested, there is research happening now in terms of myelin repair and regeneration, but also myelin protection. So Patty has relapsing remitting MS. There's also progressive forms of MS. And over time, people with relapsing remitting MS, some 60% of those folks are likely to develop some form of progressive disability. It's different for everybody. So the unfortunate news is that we don't have effective treatments for progressive MS. Other people with relapsing remitting MS have injectables, there are pills, there are infusion drugs that help to manage the disease, that inhibit progression, inhibit the number of attacks and the severity of the attacks. But none of those really work effectively for progressive MS. And this is really unacceptable, of course, because those are the folks who also have the greater disability. So just last September, a year ago, there was a huge conference in Boston, international conference of the Americas and the European Committee for the Treatment and Research in MS. And at that setting, the National MS Society and a number of its partner MS organizations internationally announced a commitment of $30 million to progressive MS research over the next 6 years, now 5, specifically to unlock the secrets of MS, to define new progressive MS, to define new metrics for determining what medications and what issues are dealing with MS. And the areas that are most exciting to me individually are around myelin repair and protection. They have found some very fascinating information about the disease process that indicates that there's a way to regenerate the myelin, which would be huge, because if you have the drugs that Patty's taking and that others with relapsing MS are taking that are pretty darn good at managing the disease, and then you combine it with a medication that can regenerate the myelin, you know, that's pretty close to being without disease activity. But there's a third component to really curing MS that has to do with prevention. And we're a long way away from that. But there are some clues. The researchers will tell you there are some indications. Some of it's genetic. Some of it has to do with vitamin D, perhaps. We're not really sure as a preventative. It's a very, very promising time. There's more and more effective treatments in the pipeline.
You kind of read my mind, and where I wanted to go from there was, what do we know in terms of causes, genetic, environmental? Is there anything that you may be exposed to at some point in your life? Can somebody be born with MS, do we know, or does it develop after birth?
Well, the answer to all of that is yes and no. MS is not how do I say?
Traditionally genetic? Or?
Yeah, it's not genetic in the traditional sense of what we think. You don't have one gene where it's on or off.
Right.
There's a whole set of genes that make a person's immune system susceptible to the MS disease process, but there is some sort of external trigger that gets it going, and we don't know what that is. It could be a virus or a bacterium. It could be a traumatic event or some other toxin, perhaps, that a person's exposed to that gets the immune system into like a hyperactive mode, if you will. That's the big picture there.
Patty, we've got a couple moments left here. Just in terms of kind of your day-to-day, as we said when we were speaking with you, you do not exhibit any outward signs of this, and you live really pretty much a normal life. Do you try to keep up to speed on the research on this? Do you stay in consultation with your doctors on what's next, if you will?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think people have to be their own advocates for their own health. So absolutely, staying on top of what's going on, reading everything. When I was first diagnosed, at that time, it was thought that bee stings could help people with MS. So my mother went out and bought me bees and offered to sting me.
Perfect.
But yes, we keep up with all of that.
Yeah. What's for the type of MS that you have? What's the long-term diagnosis? It's you'll probably have some recurrence every now and then.
Yes.
Over the years.
It's different for every person with MS. There's no course of the disease that's the same. For me, the disease has affected my vision very severely. I don't drive anymore. I really can't see as well at all. But my legs are fine. My limbs are fine. Because other people with MS can't walk.
Right. Sometimes you see people that are impacted with their ability to walk or move. Their motor skills are impaired. So it really is. There is no one cookie cutter issue. It's really per patient, each per patient.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we want to get the information out about what's going to be happening. Your group is called the Blister Buddies.
Yes.
Is that because you guys get blisters?
Absolutely.
And you do the walk. You're going to try to do the whole 50 miles?
I sure will.
All right. Now, tell me how people can get involved and raise some money with you, Patty.
Well, what they can do is go onto the website, the chapter office website, and you can donate that way. You can also register to participate through that website. Steve, why don't you give the address, because I always get it wrong.
Sure.
It's msnewengland.org. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, this is taking place on September 11th, 12th, and 13th here on Cape Cod. It all gets underway, let's see here, on Friday with an 8 a.m. start, candlelight ceremony on Saturday, a Sunday finish, and it all starts on the Highness Village Green and then ends up back on the Highness Village Green on the 13th. Did I get all that in?
That's right.
All right, sounds good. It sounds like a great event. We hope a lot of our listeners will get involved with this. It is a great cause, and I'm sure many of our listeners here, some of them perhaps living with MS or friends and relatives with it. It clearly is a very widespread disease, and a lot of people are are impacted by it. So hopefully we'll get some folks out to help out and join in your effort. Steve Sookikian is the Associate VP of Communications with the National MS Society Greater New England Chapter, and Patty Thorpe, a woman here in Massachusetts living with MS and also a Chapter Board of Trustees member. I'd like to thank both of you for stopping by today and joining us here on the Sunday Journal. We wish you the best of luck coming up on your big event starting on September 11th. Thanks for coming by today, Steve and Patty.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much. You can get more information about this as well on our website at capecod.com. This has been the latest segment of the Sunday Journal. I'm your host, Matt Pitto.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.